And now I want to invite you to this discussion about harassment prevention. The question we want to ask is how to protect journalists and minimize the effects of social and online harassment and hatred against newsroom professionals. And I need to admit that this topic is extremely important to me as well, because in the recent month, many of my journalist colleagues experienced that. So let me introduce you to Mr. Sami Koivisto, Senior Advisor on Harassment Prevention, YLE, Finland. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Very nice to see you.
So the stage is yours.
Thank you.
Explain us all.
Yes. Thank you for having me. It's my first time in Poland, and so far it has been fantastic. I'm sorry that my topic is not that wonderful. It's about harassment, but it's something that we really need to talk about this day and age. It's something that we share in many different countries. Okay, can I have my presentation on the screen, please? It's okay. Somebody is harassing our presentation. Yes, yeah, no, there it is. I hope that we have some time for questions in the end. I try to be quick. Yeah. Here we have some headlines of some large Finnish media companies, Helsingin Sanomat, MTV, and Yle, where I'm from. These are cases, kind of big cases of harassment that have taken place in Finland in recent years. It's very important that journalists follow these cases, but unfortunately this is only the tip of the iceberg. Because harassment is a growing occupational health and safety risk amongst many different professionals, not just journalists. It's also politically a very difficult topic. In Finland, the police resources are far too small for thorough investigations for these cases. They also vary a bit from year to year. And one thing is that harassment is often conducted through foreign service, which kind of basically stops the investigations in many cases. There are also problems with legislation. Finnish legislation does cover I would say most parts of online harassment today, but it doesn't cover targeting thoroughly. So that leads to great variation between different regional cards and also different police departments with how they deal with these issues. And the current Finnish government actually scrapped the planned targeting legislation recently. There are positive developments too. Illegal threat can be officially charged since 2021 in Finland. Finnish people, I would say, quite well understand the significance of this challenge today. More than 2/3 of Finns feel that the general conversational culture has weakened, and they link this into hate speech and targeting. And many people also understand what kind of threat for democracy this phenomenon brings. But still, not everyone understands it, and we need to carry on talking about that. Harassment really needs to be investigated through journalism, also through investigative journalism, especially when there is a political connection behind it. This is very important for the general understanding of this phenomena, as well as for freedom of speech and for understanding the significance of constitutional state and the rule of law. Here is a picture, the latest one from Sweden. Commercial channel 4 recently had this massive piece of news. They had discovered that there is a troll nest within Sverigedemokraterna. It's a populist right-wing party. So they had a journalist who kind of went into the organization for a couple of months and did his job. That kind of journalism I clap for and wish more for. I don't really know if this is harassment. This sentence I often hear, especially when younger people come to talk to me about issues that relate to strong criticism and harassment. Kind of belittling of the issue seems to be there, as if I didn't have the right to talk about these questions, as if I didn't have the right to talk about the feelings that arise in me. So I try to talk to them that harassment can be intentional, but it does not have to be intentional. Harassment can be illegal, but it does not have to be illegal. Harassment can be direct and severe, but it does not have to be. It can be subtle too. It can also be something that other people don't understand as harassment unless the context is thoroughly explained to them. Subtle harassment can be deeply personal and intimidating too. We often hear that we all need to be able to learn from criticism, but honestly, in today's digital world, how many of us are always able to tell and point out the exact difference between honest, justified, helpful criticism and harassment? Then again, on the other hand, harsh criticism is not necessarily harassment. When I'm personally in doubt with this question that whether or not this serious criticism ushered on me is harassment or if it is just criticism, I just try to ask myself and answer with all the honesty that I have in my being that whether this criticism at hand is mainly based on actual facts and not personal issues, and whether it is presented so that I could potentially learn from it. If the answer is yes to both, then I try to see it as valuable criticism and not as harassment. But severe or subtle, harassment or not, it is nevertheless good and important to talk about it. It's really important to share what you feel in these situations. That is the best way of preventing self-censorship. Can't you people just take criticism at Yle? This is the sentence that I've heard probably more than any other in my life. Well, we can take a lot of criticism here, but there are also certain limits to it. I'm going to share you some examples of mundane and less mundane experiences of negative feedback. You may think yourselves then if this is harassment or not. Journalist writes about immigration. This leads to irrelevant, personal and threatening email feedback. Insulting, targeting and shaming articles about the journalist pop up on disinformation websites. Journalists are working on a yet unfinished article. This leads to social media criticism targeted at the journalist. Several personal contacts to both the journalist and his supervisor are made before the article is published. A convicted criminal makes an angry phone call to a Newsdesk journalist who wrote about his case. He is mad about every little detail in the article. A journalist specialized in football is harassed during a game he needs to report about. A journalist has been under a larger targeting and shaming campaign for a while. Her name pops up in negative contexts in social debates about topics that have absolutely nothing to do with her work. And this is an interesting one. A person with a rather large social media following who was seriously, and probably still today, is seriously dedicated to a truly good cause, wanted to be interviewed. And, you know, he was so strongly involved with the situation that he just started to jump into his car and drive to different regional Yle offices. He wanted to be interviewed on the radio. He drove hundreds of kilometers around Finland to, I think, 3 different stations. And perhaps wisely enough, those local stations said no to him. He got more and more angry, and he drove to Helsinki, to our headquarters, and got in and went to the lobby and connected to his social followers from the lobby and announced that I'm not going to leave this building before my audio is played on Radio Suomi, which is Finland's biggest radio channel, and serve me with some bubbly drinks. This situation was solved in such a way that I called him, and at the same time our safety guards escorted him out of the building, and I carried on speaking with this person for more than an hour, making sure that he is back in his car, driving back home to his family. And I hope that today he understands that maybe this was not the coolest way for his excellent cause. Another march in to our lobby, a political activist marches with his bodyguards because he would like to present us a prize, the prize of silencing his party to death. And he was streaming this situation. During the pandemic, our TV news made a live interview with an entrepreneur who strongly opposed the safety restrictions implemented by the Finnish government. He was very unhappy with this interview afterwards, and he decided to attack both Yle and the journalist personally on social media. And he got his followers to join him in the derogatory comments and sharing of manipulated pictures and memes. Then during this year's Eurovision Song Contest, as they were rehearsing in Malmö, this part of the final where they give out the votes, the points, a member of the Finnish team participated there, and her task was to read the points of the Finnish jury, imaginary points, and they had been scripted to be awarded to Israel, and she felt that she didn't want to say Israel at that point and decided to say Ireland instead. And this turned into a massive, heavy international political targeting session because, you know, the situation was filmed, leaked, and used on social media against her. She thought it was just a rehearsal. Then in 2019, there was a parliamentary election in Finland, and we made in that year that all the leaders of every party got a long TV interview, an hour's spot, you know, on their own. And then we had technical problems at Yle Areena, which is our streaming services, and one of these interviews dropped out of Areena among several other TV programs. And of course, it happened to be the Populist Party's leader whose interview was disappeared for a while. And they took, as soon as it happened, all the advantage that they could from this unfortunate situation and turned this into a huge speculative rage storm against Yle, suggesting that maybe Yle intentionally censored his interview in order to affect the election results. A crazy, totally crazy, bonkers idea. But this actually turned into the single biggest flood of negative feedback that Yle got on the entire year 2019. So this kind of stuff does work on some people. I have to add that it actually took us 3.5 hours to get that interview back online. A well-known populist politician's husband dies. The news story about the death shortly recaps the actual economic crimes committed by the deceased, something that had been published several times before. A harassment campaign begins, targeted at the journalist who wrote the news story. Similar campaigns may begin when a news story covers certain high-risk topics, such as immigration, asylum seekers, certain politics and politicians, Israeli-Palestine questions, Russia, sexual minorities, minority languages, religion, climate change, some health issues, unhealthy food, and the Finnish specialty, large predators, especially wolves. Racism, sexual harassment, persecution, death threats. A mass email sent to a number of Yle journalists states, "You should all be killed." The email includes horrifying pictures of shredded corpses. Same is repeated several times. Then I take a look at one particular case. There is a climate change activists demonstration and also their counter-demonstration going on in front of the Finnish parliament on Mannerheimin tie street, which is the main street of Finnish capital. And here is Nadde Barman. She is a journalist for Svenska Yle, the Swedish language department of our company. She, at that time, was hosting a TV series called Nadde förstör världen, Nadde ruins the world. Her series explored climate change questions through the journalist's own real-life decisions. So she arrived on site of those two demonstrations and filmed material there. Thinking it would add a bit of fun for her show, she decided to take a few dance steps on the street because the anti-demonstrations were playing traditional Finnish polka through their loudspeakers on the street. Then this man steps into picture. He is MP and the vice chairman of the populist True Finns party, also a holder of at least 3 judgments on ethnic agitation, Sebastian Tynkkynen. He was on location supporting the counter-demonstrations and also shooting live material for his YouTube followers. He is a very talented YouTube hoster. He films Barman's dance steps from a different angle without her noticing this situation. And then he shares that content to his followers. And here you see with the text under his picture where he states that you are free to use and cut this material the way how you wish to do it and use it, for example, on TikTok and Instagram accounts. And people who follow him did as he suggested. So different versions of Tynkkynen's content are shared and put into false contexts. These Barman's dance steps are presented as if she was taking part in a demonstration and also mocking the police by dancing in front of the police while holding a wireless microphone in her hand. This is a description of what she felt like when she found out what had happened. I'll translate it to you. When I took my phone out after the shoot, it was as if it had exploded. There were a number of unanswered calls, messages, emails. My first thought was that I do not have a job where to return tomorrow. I was sure that I had done something wrong. I have never, ever felt myself as helpless. Then I'm going to share one personal experience, which started with this tweet. In Finland, there is at the moment a parliamentary group consisting of MPs from all the parties who have been already working several months on possible cuts that could be made to our company. Decisions are expected at the end of June. We just today heard in the news that this was lengthened a little bit to the end of June. During the campaign of the presidential elections in January, the True Finns candidate, who is also the chairman of the Finnish parliament at the moment, said in an interview that Yle spreads left-wing propaganda and its funds should be cut in order to prevent Yle's rottenness and corruption. He said also many other things in a similar vein. The chairman of our company government criticized this publicly. It was published on our company pages, and I decided to share his text to my followers on X with my own note, which is up there on that picture. What kind of a country's president would actually do the things to responsible media that the presidential candidate speaks about? And then I replied to my question myself, certainly not a president of a democratic country. And after that, all hell broke loose. First, I was criticized online by the chairman of the party's parliamentary group. As soon as he did it, I knew this was turning serious. I decided to react in such a way that I would openly follow this kind of targeting process, which was starting there, and tweet about it to my followers. Of course, this turned into a more massive shitstorm. I was strongly criticized by several MPs from government parties. They accused me of being political, and their campaigning was supported by the populist party's own media. They wrote 3 shaming articles of me. This led to thousands of hate messages targeted on me. Somebody wrote that real democracy would be if I would be hanged on the market square. But personally, the saddest thing for me was that somebody, an ex-colleague whom I had supported when she had been severely attacked in her job, turned against me online. Here you see some images of how I tried to follow what was going on. You see there is more than 400,000 times that these have been seen, and it's a big number for a country of 5.6 million people. I had supporters, and they are my heroes. For me, this incident turned also into a chance to experience firsthand how well our own support systems for the harassed work. Behind the curtains, I received excellent support from Yle, our health services, some peers, and some of the bosses. I also noticed some needs for development, especially with communication, of how the information in situations like these is delivered inside the company to those who need to know about it. Sharing information is crucial also from the point of view of the harassed for understanding the choice that the company makes for whether or not to support their employer publicly. You know, sometimes the public support that the company would give would just make the situation worse. These are the kind of issues that really need to be talked about the person who is being harassed, so that the person feels that, you know, he or she is fully supported. So more openness inside of the company is helpful for everybody. That being said, you know, I've seen many of situations like these, and I'm not criticizing my company. I think that they did exactly the right choice in that situation of not publicly supporting me. But what I want to say is that that question needs to be dealt with and talked about. When the times are bad, we should not be left alone. Human beings just need each other. Journalists are human beings too. We need to defend each other. Colleagues from other medias saved the public side of this story. The tabloid newspaper Iltalehdi's journalist Ida Erämaa interviewed me and wrote an article where I could speak. She has been severely targeted herself, and she has been supported by her peers and other media, so she knew what was going on. She knew what needs to be done. That's why she called me. Here is a chapter from her article. Also, the Union of Journalists publicly supported me, and similarly the magazine Journalisti, which is the professional magazine for Finnish journalists, interviewed and gave me the possibility to tell what I thought what was going on. There's my dog Sulo in the picture. I have to say that I will remember these deeds of these colleagues from other medias for the rest of my life. They are some of the most significant things anyone has ever done to me. To me, they are also the living proof of the existence of the power and of the goodwill of journalists as a community. And I really think that this is what we really need more in order to combat the phenomena of harassment. I want to talk to you next about what does harassment feel like. Going into that, perhaps I try to quickly share a mediation experience. A couple of years back, I was working still as a social media journalist in our news department, and there was a terrorist attack in Turku, the old capital of Finland, a knife attack. And I wrote an article about, or a column about the kind of social media reactions on that situation. And that was shared and widely discussed on different platforms. I was also criticized in some of the platforms about that heavily. And somebody wrote anonymously that a wish that my family should be killed. Our security department felt that this needs to be reported to the police, and on that occasion the police was able to identify this person, and we were given an opportunity to meet each other face to face on mediation. And I'm sure that that experience is for both of us something that we will remember for the rest of our lives. When I told him at the beginning of the mediation process that what it feels like to be constantly harassed, he listened very carefully. I could see tears coming to his eyes. And he apologized 3 times for what he had done. And he said, "Sami, if someone had written the same things about my family as I wrote about your family, my own reactions would have been exactly the same as yours." On that moment, I knew that there is no danger with this guy. I knew that this guy is never going to continue writing hate speech. I knew that I could talk about the situation with my family at home. You know, I don't want to share all the shit that I've been targeted with. I want to protect them. And I just have to trust our security department. But at that point, I knew that I can do it. And I also had a chance to face my own stereotypical thinkings about people who write hate speech. You know, if I had beforehand thought that these hate speakers, they probably look like Nazis, I have to say that I look like a Nazi much more than he did. He was kind of very sensitive and kind-feeling hipster type of person who has small children at home. And still, you know, he was writing this kind of language online. But it was a very significant meeting for both of us. So from the point of the view of the harasser, what harassment feels like, there can be very different motives. It can be personal problems, it can be frustration, stress, social challenges, it can be loneliness, lack of empathy, a need to belong. There can also be political reasons, need for visibility, hunger for power. For some, like my mediation colleague, harassment is more or less unconscious and can be connected to both a sincere need to criticize and maybe also a lack of proper communication skills. It can also be a learned and a taught behavior pattern. An unconscious harasser might not empathize with the harassed at all, simply because the harassment does not happen face to face. A deeper understanding of one's own reactions in, for example, mediation or a bullying situation can have a strong impact on how a person relates to and deals with harassment. Then it's a totally different story with more deliberate harassment. That is closer to actual violence. So harassment can be a passionate hobby, or it can be part of your professionalism, for example, for some politicians who prefer seeing their action as justified criticism, no matter how personal they get with it. Typically, people who actively target, harass, and generate hate speech online strongly deny their involvement, belittle the phenomenon, and blame their victims for what they do. Then for the harassed. Often the harassment situation is a very complex, a potentially harmful personal crisis. It should be a crisis of the community, not just a single person. Continuing offensive behavior that demeans, humiliates, and intimidates a person is appalling and has nothing whatsoever to do with social and moral reasonableness. Harassment should also never be part of any justified criticism. Harassment can, but it does not have to be illegal. Personal reactions to online harassment can be similar to bullying. There can be confusion, exclusion, shame, insecurity, incompetence, unworthiness, loneliness, depression. So very, very strong emotions that go into the core of your professional identity too. Without proper support, the harassed can, for example, start questioning his own objectivity too much, start censoring himself more, develop suicidal behavior patterns, and become more willing to give up his work. We're talking about hidden violence here. This is what the harasser has aimed for. A need for thorough, well-organized, and personally tailored support is obvious. Recognizing the need early is crucial. It's essential to both the community and for the person herself. It may not be easy to talk about these experiences. Typically, we journalists belittle our personal experiences of harassment. That's exactly why we need to talk about these issues more. So more talk, less thick skin. A couple of years back, the head of security department of Yle and I made a questionnaire to Yle journalist supervisors. We wanted to ask them that what kind of support they wished for when they are working with journalists who are being harassed. First of all, they needed and wished for peer support, especially from those of us who already had been supporting the harassed. They wanted better and more accessible information about the harassment cases in order to make it possible to step into the situation and thus offer support earlier. So they wished for less thick skin. They wanted clearer analysis and better policies for those harassment situations where there might be a need for public support. They wanted more general understanding of social media, more tools for supporting those of us who encounter racism, and in general, more talk and analysis of this phenomenon that becomes more and more significant. I try to quickly go through this. How can we best support our colleagues? Anticipate. On the whole company level, start prioritizing general awareness of harassment prevention now if you're not doing it already. This is a difficult, a complex issue, and it needs to be thoroughly addressed. All safety guidelines, support systems, trainings, advice relating to this phenomena need to be found easily. They need to be explored by everyone in your company before something happens. So let's make talking about harassment as easy as possible in our companies. Listen. Listen carefully to the harassed. Make sure they feel that they can safely talk about their experiences to people who can actually help them to the extent of their own choice. The harassed person, more than anything, needs the ability to trust. Trust the colleagues, the support systems, the entire company. And let's remember journalism. We need to write about these cases. Understanding the motives behind harassment help us all to understand also today's politics more, and it also helps us to see the significance of journalism, of freedom of speech, and the rule of law in democracy. I talked about Nadde Barman earlier. Svenska Yle wrote an article about her case, and I also applaud for them for doing that. I'm not going to go into our system of support. You can ask me questions about that later. I'm more than happy to talk about those with you in detail. Instead, I will end with the picture of my dog. We need more talk. We need less thick skin. So let us not shut up about harassment. Let's listen and support each other and beat harassment together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's such an important topic that maybe we have some question from the audience. There's a question, yeah, from Mrs. Monica.
Yes.
There's a microphone, yes.
I just wanted to ask you how, in this difficult situation that you've been through, cope emotionally. How did you handle such a terrible thing that happened to you and obviously to other journalists, but where your strength came from?
I shouldn't have taken my dog's picture away because he's an important part of my personal support.
Emotional support.
What?
Emotional support.
Emotional support, yes, exactly. I go for a run with my dog, usually run in a certain area near a stream. It's very important to me to go to that special place because I feel that I can throw all the shit into the river and see it floating away. So that's part of it. But the really important part is the support system that, you know, we've been working on at Yle. So that means having colleagues who are willing to talk about these issues, having bosses who understand that it is significant to talk about these issues with as low threshold as possible. So the general atmosphere of easy talking about this awful, difficult situation is crucial. So all those things, I think. Then, of course, you have friends and colleagues with whom to share things. One thing I'm not going to do is to talk about this with my mother because, you know, she gets more worried. So I protect her about these issues. Thank you for your question.
Any other questions? All right, so maybe a quick question from me. You mentioned about support system. Should it be built in newsrooms or maybe like in a more wide way, for example?
What was the...
Yeah, you were saying about support system.
Support system, yes.
How should it be organized? Within newsrooms or maybe it should be a state issue?
Well, I think it is like a HR, you know, personal, you know, it has to come from the real top of the whole company and it has to go through all parts of the company. Of course, newsroom is a very, you know, fundamental part of it because, you know, that's probably where you get most of these really difficult situations. So in the newsroom, I would do everything that I could in order to create an atmosphere that talking about these things is as easy as possible. And if there is anyone who is kind of like belittling this issue, whether this person is a boss or a peer, I would actually go, you know, and ask this person that, are you serious? Do you understand this phenomena, what it can do to us? You know, it's a question of, basic question of safety, fundamental question. So, yeah, talking about it as easy as possible in the newsroom.
Thank you for that. Sami Koivisto, our guest, thank you so much. Huge applause.